Everybody, I just wanted to really quickly go over some tips and tricks for writing a really bang-up organic lab for CHE 241 and CHE 243. And in this case, I wanted to make sure that I go over errors, headings, and sections in your lab notebook. Now, if you make an error in your lab notebook, okay, it's not the end of the world. And remember, the point is to maintain the integrity of your lab notebook. So when you do this, like you're like, Walsh, let me make sure that this is good. So you go Walsh, and again, remember, you're writing in black ink. Walsh is awesome. And you're writing that in your lab notebook wherever it is, okay? But you realize that you made a mistake. You don't go through and go, oh, I'm going to cross this out. You don't do that, okay? What you do is you take this and you write one line through and you say, and then you write what you meant to say above it or next to it. And then you initial, and usually you date. So the point is now I can read that, what I crossed off, and I'm reading what I wrote. Now that doesn't seem like a big deal until you have a number like 9.3 grams, but it wasn't really 9.3 grams. It was really supposed to be 1.2 grams. And the integrity of your lab book has to be maintained. I have to know that you made a mistake of 9.3 grams. You can't erase it. You shouldn't get rid of it. You shouldn't disavow any knowledge of it. Own the mistake. It's okay. You don't get points taken off for it. But that's how you deal with errors. Small errors. Now, if you have large errors in your lab notebook, here's the thing. Again, you want to maintain the integrity of the lab book. So let's say you go through and you write all of this. What I find is that students who aren't thinking about the integrity of the lab book, they'll rip out the page in the lab book. Now, if you're using the right lab book, it's bound, and I'll be able to tell that you ripped the page out. Well, that's not what we want to see. So how do you deal with making large errors? Okay, all you have to do is put a line through it. And again, DW, or sign, and then the date, 9/11/16. And then pick up on the next page, or below it, okay? Whatever it happens to be. Okay. Now, another thing that happens that I count as kind of an error, it's not really an error, but sometimes you'll do something and then on the next page, let me say, so you have like a page, and so you're doing an experimental procedure, set this up, and you write a whole bunch of experimental procedure, but then on the next page, you write data table. Okay, so experimental procedures on page 108, your data table is on page 109, but you need to continue with your experimental procedure. That's fine. You don't have to rip out and rearrange and cross things out so everything is perfect. If everything is perfect, you're doing something wrong in lab. Okay? All you need to do is say continued on 110. And so that way you can go to page, you skip the data table, and then on page 110, you're going to say, okay, experimental procedure continued, CONT''D, and then you just pick up with wherever you left off. Okay? Now, some more hints and tricks. Okay? Headings. Every new section should have a heading, but not necessarily every new page. Okay? So, let's make sure that we get that. Okay? So, your pre-lab is going to start with a general procedure. So, the heading is going to be, okay, experiment 9 cyclohexanol, or whatever lab it happens to be. Okay, and then it's going to say either below it or next to it. I write below, but you can write next to it. Okay, general procedure. Now, if that goes on to the next page, great. Okay, if it's going on to the next page, you don't have to write a new heading on that page. Okay, so that way, this is page 214. Okay, on page 215, you don't have to have a new heading. You can just continue writing your general procedure, and then you section break it, and then whatever the next thing is, which should be your physical constant sheet, phys constants, okay, or calculations, okay, that's let me make sure that I numbered it right, 216, okay, you're going to do experiment 9, cyclohexanol, and then you're going to physical constants, okay, and then you're going to do experiment 9 calculations, prelim calculations. That's page 2. What page was it? I keep skipping over too many pages. 217. Okay, and on the line. Okay, and so every new section gets its own kind of unique heading. And remember to report where those sections start in the general or in the table of contents. The next thing that I want to make sure we go over is section section breaks. So every time you finish a section, okay, if it doesn't fill up the whole page, which is totally fine, you don't have to write enough to fill up a whole page or 2 whole pages. If you finish with half of the page left, okay, so you have your page here, and you write, and you have half a page left, you cross off the bottom, you either initial or sign, and then you date. That way, we know that you've left that intentionally blank, and it maintains the integrity of the lab book. Your intention is to not write any more for there. So for things in the pre-lab, like the data table in your experimental procedure, those get filled in a little bit later, along with the flow sheet. And so you don't have to do the section break. Okay, but things like the experimental procedure or any preliminary, the general procedure or the preliminary calculations, you may need a section break. Okay, so that's how you split up sections. Now, last but not least, I don't have it here, but I want to explain to you that you do not need to get all crazy when it comes time for taping your physical constants sheet into your notebook. Okay, I've had all sorts of people do all sorts of things. Okay, here's the easiest thing to do. Okay, if you're printing off your physical constant sheet, fold it in half. Okay, so fold it in half, and then take it and tape it into your lab notebook so that it opens up outside the lab notebook. Okay, so this is the sheet, phys constant, so tape it here all the way around the edge here so that now this folds over on itself. That will do fine. You don't have to do all this crazy stuff that I see people do. They try to cut it and shrink it and do all sorts of stuff. I'm not stressing you out about how you lay out your physical constant sheet. Now, this is true for any piece of paper you're going to tape into your lab book. Tape it in so that it is landscape. Okay, if it's if it's something written, put the heading up here toward the binding and just have it so that it folds in this way. Okay, if you have multiple pages, let's say you're doing an analysis, if you have multiple pages in analysis, one taped page per one page in your lab journal. That's it. Okay, don't tape 17 pages of an analysis on one page in your lab journal. Okay, so those are some tips and tricks, some little hints that I've learned along the way from my years teaching at Rowan College at Burlington County. So I hope that helps, and have a great day.